Have you ever replayed a conversation in your head, not because of what someone said, but because of the exact moment you felt yourself agree with it? The words were still hanging in the air, and somewhere beneath your conscious mind a switch flipped. Not "I hear you," but "you're right." And that tiny invisible acceptance is what you're actually running from at 3 a.m. when you're rewriting the script, giving yourself better comebacks, imagining you had said something different. You're not trying to change what they said. You're trying to take back what you accepted. That's the fracture point most people miss. You think the damage is in the delivery, the tone, the timing, the intent, but the real injury happens in the nanosecond between hearing and believing. Someone says you're difficult to love, and the words themselves are just sounds. But in that gap, your system scans for evidence, finds a memory of being too much, too needy, too complicated, and before you can intervene, you've accepted the translation. This is why you're alone. Now the words have a home inside you. Now they have weight. And now you're carrying them everywhere, waiting for someone else to say something similar, so you can add another brick to a wall you think is protecting you, but is actually just your prison. You don't remember agreeing to this. You remember being hurt, but hurt is just the emotional signature of a belief being confirmed. It's the feeling of your inner architecture resonating with external input. And that architecture wasn't built by you not consciously. It was built in the gaps between what you needed and what you got. When you cried and were told you were manipulative. When you succeeded and were told not to get cocky. When you expressed a boundary and were told you were selfish. Each time you didn't just hear a criticism, you accepted a definition. You let someone else's perception become your blueprint. Here's where you feel it. You're in a group chat and someone makes a joke about people who overthink everything. You don't respond, but you also don't scroll past. You stare at those 3 words, overthink everything, and feel them sink into a specific place in your chest. Because 3 years ago, a partner told you that your anxiety was exhausting, and you accepted that your mind was a problem to be managed, not a feature to be understood. So today when you read overthink everything, you don't hear a generalization, you hear confirmation, you feel exposed, and you start typing a response, then delete it, then type something self-deprecating, then delete that too. The message you finally send is so neutral it doesn't sound like you at all. You've disappeared into the acceptance. The pattern is subtle but relentless. You are not being attacked by words. You are being reminded of what you've already decided is true about yourself. And the reason you can't let it go is because letting it go would mean confronting the original acceptance. The moment you let someone else be the author of your identity, that's what you're really protecting. Not your feelings, but your story about who you are. And that story is written in the language of what you've accepted as fact. But why do certain people's words have more power to create this acceptance? This is where we shift into the architecture of validation dependency. You have an internal hierarchy of voices. At the top sits the voice you never got full approval from a parent, a mentor, a first love. Their words don't just land, they legislate. When they say something neutral, like, "You've always been independent," you accept the subtext, and that's why we're not close. You fill in the meaning based on what you believe they believe about you. And that belief about their belief is the most powerful acceptance of all, because it feels like perception, not projection. Consider this scenario. You're at a performance review. Your manager says, "You're incredibly talented, but you need to work on collaboration." You hear the compliment, but you store the criticism. Not because it's more true, but because it matches a belief you accepted in 3rd grade when you were picked last for group projects. You decided then that you were fundamentally uncooperative, that your mind worked differently in a way that excluded you. So today, when your manager says collaboration, you don't hear a skill to develop. You hear a genetic flaw being confirmed. You accept that you are the problem, not the behavior. and you carry that acceptance home, or it becomes the reason you don't reach out to friends, why you isolate, why you tell yourself you're just not a people person. The acceptance becomes a life strategy. The internal contradiction here is that you want to be seen, but you've accepted that being seen means being judged. So you perform a version of yourself that is judgment-proof, but that version is also connection-proof. And the loneliness that results becomes further evidence that the original acceptance was correct. See, I am difficult to love. I am uncooperative. I am too much. The loop is self-sealing. Now, a sudden question to break the pattern. What if the words you accepted weren't ever about you? What if they were about the limitations of the person who said them? When your parent called you selfish for having needs, maybe they were telling the story of their own unmet needs. When your partner called you dramatic, maybe they were signaling their own discomfort with emotion. You accepted their limitation as your definition. You took their blind spot and wore it as identity. How many of your deepest self-beliefs are just other people's inability to see you clearly? This is the ego exposure. Your ego isn't what you think it is. It's not confidence or arrogance. It's the collection of acceptances you've armored yourself with. It's the story you defend when you feel attacked. And it's incredibly fragile because it's not real. It's a compilation of other people's perceptions that you've mistaken for your own. So when new words come in that challenge that story, the ego doesn't just feel threatened, it feels annihilated. Because if I'm difficult to love isn't true, then who have you been all these years? What have you been protecting? What have you missed? The awareness gap is where transformation hides. Right now, you experience acceptance as a feeling. That hurt, so it must be true. But what if hurt is just the sensation of a belief being touched? Like a toothache, doesn't mean your tooth is bad. It means there's nerve activity. The pain is information, not indictment. But you've been interpreting it as proof. You've been using your emotional response as evidence of truth when it's actually just evidence of activation. This is the gap between the activation and the interpretation. There is space. In that space, you can ask, what did I just accept? Not, why did they say that? But what part of me grabbed onto it and called it real? Let me show you a scenario that will feel like I'm reading your texts. You send a message to someone you're dating. It's vulnerable, a little raw. You admit you're scared of being too much. They reply, I don't think you're too much. You should feel relieved. Instead, you feel panic. Why? Because you accepted too much long ago. And now their reassurance feels like a challenge to that identity. Your system doesn't know who you are without that acceptance. So you push back. You say you don't know me yet. You're not protecting yourself from them. You're protecting your acceptance from being proven wrong. You're defending your prison because freedom feels like annihilation. The behavioral pattern here is what I call belief maintenance. You don't just have beliefs. You actively maintain them by filtering reality through their lens. You seek out people who will confirm them, even unconsciously. You interpret neutrality as confirmation. You reject reassurance as naive. You are the curator of your own pain, not because you enjoy it, but because it's familiar. And familiar feels like control. But control is the illusion we need to dismantle. You think that by accepting negative beliefs, you're preparing yourself for the worst. You're bracing, you're being realistic, but you're actually creating the worst by living inside it preemptively. You've accepted a reality where you are fundamentally flawed, and now you interpret everything through that flaw. The world isn't hurting you. You're living in a world that your acceptances have colored, and then you point to the color as proof it was always there. Here's a perspective shift that will feel like a drop. What if every painful acceptance was actually a misinterpretation of a survival signal? When you were young and accepted, I'm too needy, maybe you were actually detecting that your needs wouldn't be met, and you adapted by shrinking them. The acceptance wasn't truth, it was strategy. But strategies outlive their usefulness. And now you're using a childhood map to navigate adult territory, wondering why you keep hitting walls. The social dynamics of this are invisible but everywhere. You are in a constant, silent negotiation with everyone you meet. Will you confirm what I've accepted, or will you challenge it? And you are unconsciously drawn to people who will confirm, because confirmation feels like intimacy. It feels like being known, but it's not being known, it's being predictable. And predictability is the opposite of connection. It's a script, and you've memorized yours so well you don't even know you're performing. A scenario to make this concrete. You're at a party. Someone asks what you do for fun. You freeze. Not because you don't have fun, but because you've accepted that your kind of fun is weird. You've accepted that your interests are niche, that your humor is odd, that your way of being is something to be strategically revealed, not naturally expressed. So you give a generic answer, you perform normal, and when they lose interest and walk away, you accept that as confirmation. See, they wouldn't get me anyway. But the truth is, you never gave them a chance to get you. You gave them a performance, and they responded to the performance. The acceptance created the evidence. The mid-retention spike here is this sudden realization. You are not protecting yourself from rejection. You are enacting it internally before anyone else gets the chance. You reject yourself first, accept your own inadequacy as fact, and then use other people's words as props in this solo drama. The words are just lines you're feeding to the character you've accepted you are. Now let's go deeper into the mechanism of acceptance itself. It's not a cognitive process, it's a somatic one. It happens in the body before the mind. Someone says something and your chest tightens, your stomach drops, your throat closes, and in that physical response, you make meaning. You think, my body is reacting, therefore this must be true. But your body is reacting to a pattern match, not to reality. It's a learned response. A neural pathway that says this frequency means danger. And you've been practicing that pathway for years. The identity instability is revealed here. Your identity is not a solid thing that gets attacked. It's a fluid process that solidifies around acceptance. You are, moment to moment, becoming the story you believe about yourself. And that story is written in the language of what you've accepted from people who were never qualified to be your biographer. Let me show you a delayed reaction scenario. 3 days ago, a friend said, "You're so strong for dealing with all that." You smiled and said thank you. But tonight, you're crying in the shower because you finally felt what that acceptance means. That you have to be strong. That you can't ask for help. That your pain is only palatable when it's packaged as resilience. You accepted strong as an identity, which means you accepted that weak is not an option. So you perform strength until you collapse. The acceptance wasn't a compliment, it was a cage. And you built it yourself, one brick at a time, every time you agreed to be the strong one. The ego exposure here is that your ego isn't just defending the negative beliefs, it's defending the positive ones too. Because any belief, once accepted, becomes part of the structure, and a structure is what the ego calls me. So when someone challenges strong, you defend it just as fiercely as when someone confirms difficult. The ego doesn't care about content, it cares about continuity. It wants the story to stay the same because it doesn't know what exists outside the story. No, a sharp internal question. What if the ultimate acceptance is that you have the power to accept or reject any word that enters your field? Not with force, not with affirmation or denial, but with observation. What if the moment of pain is actually the moment of choice? But you've been choosing so automatically you think it's not a choice. You think you have to accept what feels true. But feels true is just feels familiar. And familiar is just well practiced. The awareness gap is widening now. You can start to see it. The space between the word and the meaning. Between the meaning and the belief. between the belief and the identity. That space is where you live, not in the story, but in the awareness of the story. And every time you notice yourself accepting, you widen that gap a little more. Until one day someone says something that would have devastated you, and you watch it like a leaf falling. You see it. You don't grab it. You don't accept it. You just let it pass through. A scenario for this new angle: you're in therapy. The therapist says, "It sounds like you're carrying a lot of shame." You feel the familiar sting. The belief, "I'm shameful," starts to activate. But this time you pause. You notice the acceptance mechanism gearing up. You ask yourself, am I shameful, or am I just feeling shame? The difference is subtle and universe-wide. One is identity. The other is experience. And in that moment you realize you've been accepting feelings as facts, sensations as sentences. You've been letting your body write your biography. The social dynamics shift here too. When you stop accepting, you stop performing. And when you stop performing, people don't know what to do with you. They keep offering the same cues, expecting the same responses. And when you don't bite, they escalate, they push harder. Not because they're malicious, but because your non-acceptance breaks the unconscious contract. I will be your mirror if you will be mine. And without that contract, the social fabric feels unstable. But that's their instability, not yours. You are just no longer maintaining their beliefs by accepting them as your own. The final contradiction: you think acceptance is what makes you relatable, human, connected. But it's actually what keeps you separate. Because every acceptance of a false belief is a brick in the wall between you and your actual self, and you can't connect from behind a wall. You can only perform. So the words that hurt the ones you accepted are not just wounds, they are the wall itself, and you are both the builder and the prisoner. Now, the open loop you're left with: if you stop accepting, what remains? If you are not the collection of acceptances you've accumulated, then who are you? This is the question that makes the ego panic, because the answer isn't another identity. It's not "I am strong," or "I am worthy," or "I am enough." Those are just better sounding acceptances. The answer is, you are the awareness that notices acceptance. You are the space where the words appear. You are not what you believe. You are the capacity to believe. And that capacity is neutral, open, free. So the next time someone says something and you feel that familiar sting, don't ask, why would they say that? Ask, what did I just accept? And then, more dangerously, what would happen if I returned it unopened? Not with anger, not with indifference, but with the simple recognition: that's not mine. That belongs to your story, not mine. The words will keep coming. They always do. But you will no longer be the one catching them, cataloging them, building your house out of them. You will be the one who watches them fall like rain and lets them soak into the ground where they belong. And you will remain unbuilt, unaccepted, finally free to be what you always were before you agreed to be otherwise.